Exporting! So I'm happy with my animation of my goat coming down this way and looking this way. However, when I click on the camera, it kind of goes from where the camera is, which kind of makes sense. So rendering wise, I need to do a little bit of adjusting to make sure that it's actually pointing what I want it to be pointing at. So first things first, I'm just going to zoom in back to where I was. I just zoomed out so I could show you where the camera was. I'm going to click on something. Let's pause this a second to stop it from running. If I go to view, and well, basically, I want to make sure that I'm looking at this in the way I want to be looking at it. So let's make it so the goat is actually looking straight at the camera. So, or at me, I should say. But if I go to view and I go to align view and change it so it's align active camera to view, then basically what that does then, if I turn around, you can see that the camera now has been positioned in the kind of eye piece which I was in. So when I click on this and I press play, then it should actually do the animation I want it to do. Great. Now, normally, in terms of like rendering a 3D model, you would just go up to render and click on render image. But you might have noticed just underneath there is render animation. Now, if I click on that, you'd think, well, that would actually export the animation as it is here. Brilliant. But it doesn't. It does it as a PNG file or like just a simple one frame of this export, which isn't what we want. So a couple of things we need to sort out first of all. I don't think it's on render. Let me just have a look at this. No, it's not on render. It's on output. I can choose what frame rate I want it to be, so I can customize it so it's a bit quicker than it currently is. I think it's set as 24 as the default anyway, but you can make your animation run a bit quicker, a bit slower, whatever you want it to do. But a bit further down, the output, first and foremost, this is where your output will be exported to. So I'm going to change that on mine so it is the desktop because I can never find that temp folder. It's just a bit of a pain. And you'll notice where it says PNG, I'm going to change that to one of these movie ones. So I'm going to use this one here because I think when I highlight over here, it says it's the most versatile one. So if I click on that, and we should be good to go. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. I might be kind of looking at my camera thinking, it's a little bit kind of closer. Like I might have stuff in the background and I might have to be zooming in and out, that type of thing. So one thing I am going to do is just click off the camera for a minute and then click on it here. Now I can mess around with it here in terms of moving things, but one thing I do want to point out is down here, if you go to data for the camera, you can choose your focal length. Now if I click on the camera itself, it'd be a bit easy to see what that is doing. So I can actually zoom in, I can zoom out if I want to, and I think I did 40 before for something, and that looked quite good in terms of like doing this in the past. I can also move it to the left, I can move it to the right as well. I know I just said left and right opposite way round, but in fact I was quite happy as it was there. And I might want to move it up and down. So you can be a bit more specific with this rather than messing around with the move tool, which sometimes causes its own issues. And there are other bits and pieces here where you can kind of have it, I think, so it doesn't actually show the grey in the background. I can't remember where that is on this, but that's something which you guys can kind of have a look at yourselves. And I'm wondering what that does actually. What happens if I click on panoramic? That doesn't change anything. But anyway, back to the output or export side of things. If I go to render and I click on render animation, what starts to happen, it starts to go through this animation frame by frame, and you'll see up here frame 6, frame 7, frame 8, frame 9. You'll see down here that it's doing it each one. But now the more you have in your like 3D model, the kind of longer it takes for this to happen. So it'll tell you the time it's taken to do it and how much space it's going to take up and so on. But I can minimize that. And as that's going along, you'll see that it's also kind of clocking on here. So I wouldn't suggest you carry on doing any like edits to it because it's in the process of doing it. But eventually, when it does get up to frame 180, which is our end frame, and I'm going to pause so it gets up to that, you'll see that it gets to this point on the last frame, it stops, it pauses, and then on your desktop, where I kind of said I was going to export it, you'll have a video file. So the video file is kind of named the amount of frames it is, you can change that. And when you double click on it to open it, it should open up in media player, whatever your default is, and there's our video. Now, that took probably about 5 minutes or so for that to render. And like I said, if you're doing something which is quite detailed, it might take an awful lot longer for that to do. But sometimes that's what you got to do, or make sure you're on a PC which can cope with that. The only other thing I want to point out is this was rendered on Eevee. Now Eevee's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, but if you've got kind of like lots of lights, lots of shadows, lots of textures and so on, a lot of people use cycles. Now cycles, I'm not going to actually run through that process onto you because I know it will take a lot longer than 5 minutes, but that's something for you to look at yourselves when you get to that stage. Hi, future Rob here. What past Rob didn't say was, if you are going to use Cycles as your render engine, this is currently set as Eevee, I'm going to change it to Cycles. I have got a few extra lights and bits and pieces on this one as well. This is something which you'll find out in one of the future tutorials, how to make liquid work like this. But as well as kind of like changing the option to Cycles, you will need to go through and change a couple of these things down here as well. So within sampling and samples, I actually quadruple all these things. I gotta think what that is now. 128 for the samples. I also tick denoise, and I'm wondering what's in there. I'm not actually going to change anything in that part. Samples here, I'm going to change up to 512. I don't know why I'm quadrupling them all, but that's what I do. Denoise there as well. And I'm also going to click on light path. So I'm just basically going to quadruple all of these things here as well. So 16, 16, I'm trying to do maths on the spot here. And I think that transparency bit, I keep it as it is. Now, when it comes to rendering this, what you'll find is when you go to render animation, and you can see it's kind of taking a while to work this stuff out as it's going, this will take an awful long time to render. But the quality of your, excuse me, the quality of your render looks a lot better. So might be worth having a look at that. Right, next video, we're going to look at how to make an object follow a path or follow a trajectory. So, for example, something spinning around this, that type of thing.